my life a lot easier. All
I
right,
hear you.
so we are recording and we're live on Facebook. And hello, everybody. Just want to say welcome. Uh, really looking forward to this conversation today. The gentleman I'm speaking with is somebody I learned about many years ago, actually through seeing him perform with Chick Corea and the Electric Band. And I've listened to so much of his music over the years, and also saw him about a year and a half ago, September 2019, Frank Gambale over in Auburn, New York, and it was a
Was
beautiful
that
show.
was that a year and a half?
Already a year and a
Oh
half.
God, COVID. Okay, yeah. Oh, anyway,
Yeah,
yeah,
I
it
know.
was.
Yeah. So just want to introduce my special guest, Mike Pope. Welcome, Mike. How you doing, man?
I'm great, Carl. Thanks for having me.
My
I'm doing really
pleasure. My
good.
pleasure. Yeah. So yeah, COVID has really changed so many things for people. Even thinking of time, like a year and a half ago already,
Mm.
almost a year, not even a year and a half, but almost. But seems a lot more recent than that. That was a fun show, man. I really enjoyed it. The Gambale thing.
I did too. The whole tour was really fun, man. We had a good time, and we just had a good time personally too. It was just fun to hang, especially with
Yeah.
Dennis. So
Yeah,
uh,
sure. That's great, man. I it's funny, I was just talking with Sean Wayland a few days ago, and he was also telling me it was just a really good tour, a good hang,
it was a good hang.
musically and otherwise. And
Yeah.
actually we were talking about Dennis too, and how he tends to just bring the best out in people. Like he stays out of the way, he does the best stuff, and I really enjoyed watching him that night, and all of you. I think watching Frank Gambale too. He's got good stage presence.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, he's
It's, he,
great.
he he always, the thing about he has such authority in his playing that it's like every time he plays something that's brilliant, which is obviously frequent, you look at him and you get that sense that he's got the look on his face like I totally knew I could do that and I did it. I hope you liked it. It's like
That's great.
he just got an unbelievable command. It's really incredible. So,
Yeah, yeah. This is an odd question to ask, but I'm going to ask because this has come up like with Sean the other night and some other things. Were you ever at any point with that group or any other groups at any point just like terrified?
terrified?
Yeah, like
No,
okay, good.
no, no. No, definitely not terrified. I, certainly. I mean, I don't. I've there've been plenty of situations when I've been insecure on one degree or another, but
Yeah,
no,
yeah. I
definitely
got it.
not terrified.
No, I just
But mainly because I don't get terrified because I prepare. If I weren't prepared, I probably would have been pretty terrified. But
yeah, yeah. And yeah, again, that wasn't really a great question to ask, but I had to ask because it seems to be coming up a lot recently. Of course, everyone's different, right? I mean,
mm,
and how they feel about themselves and playing and the situations and who they're with and the perspective they have on the people. And um, yeah, I enjoyed that show. It was great to see Frank in that environment with doing his thing, his music, and his first American tour
yeah,
with his own band. I couldn't believe it. Wow.
yeah. After all these years, right? I mean, that was pretty shocking to me too.
Yep.
We had played a year before that. Just we didn't do a tour. We just did 2 nights at the Iridium. And it was, but Dennis wasn't on it. It was Joel Rosenblatt, also a brilliant drummer, as you know.
Yeah, he's great.
And we had a really good time. We had a really good time on that as well.
That's
So
cool. So you're doing some teaching. You're
mm,
teaching at Berkeley.
I am,
Yeah. Did you say now also you're going up there once a week?
I am, yeah.
Wow, man. Yeah.
I was teaching at Berkeley, and now I'm actually teaching at Berkeley. But yeah, I started in 2017, and so I'm just on the last second half of my fourth year there now, and yeah, of course, from it was pretty remarkable actually last March when when everything shut down. I remember very distinctly. It was Friday, March 13th, which
Yep.
seems apropos, and um, that was the week before spring break, and I mean, man, it was pretty remarkable. The whole college
Hmm.
went remote in like a week,
Yeah.
and
Right.
and with I mean, I can't speak for every department. I know that Steve Bailey was so on top of everything with the bass department, and he had and not in a bad way on any level. I mean, he was on it, but he really got us all working efficiently and had us kind of leading the charge, at least for a while. I know of,
Hmm.
with getting converted over. Uh, and even enrollment didn't even drop as much as they expected. I don't think.
Hmm.
Um, um, I mean, it was anybody's guess, right? I mean, is everybody just going to be like, forget it, and enrollment dropped by 60%, or it wasn't anything that calamitous, at least.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah.
Good. That's great, man. Um, I'm going to jump to a question here from Jimmy
Okay.
Phillips.
Okay.
Jimmy's asking, what town in Ohio did you live in? Where'd you? You're from Ohio, right?
I'm from Ohio. I am. From Bowling Green, Ohio, actually, is where I grew up.
All right. I've been through Ohio many times and all around it, but never to Bowling Green.
Well, you wouldn't have much need to. Although there's a really good college there, but and there's a
Cool.
good music college there too.
Oh, cool.
Um,
Yeah, years ago, actually in 2005, my son and I rode our bicycles from Syracuse to Dallas. So we rode through.
Jeez, really?
Yeah, yeah.
Couldn't afford gas? What? Like, that's
Huh?
a long ride, man.
Oh
Wow.
God. We've been planning it since he was a little kid.
Mm,
I got to see the country in a different way. When you're on a bike on the roads, no highways, you see stuff and you're going slower. So
yeah, yeah,
we were loaded up with gear too. So it was really, Ohio was beautiful. There's so many areas that are really pretty. We were in a huge, like a day and a half of Amish country too. That was a
yeah,
blast.
yeah,
Passing horse and buggies and
yeah. That's that sort of
flip-flop on the road.
west central kind of, or east central uh, Ohio. Yeah, and there's a huge Amish community.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ohio's great. And Ohio's weird because well, for a lot of reasons, but it's the the glaciers that dug out the Great Lakes. They kind of they went down. I don't know. They went down. I guess a little around as about Columbus, I think.
Mhm.
So everything's really flat. I mean, it's flat. It was a great place to learn how to drive, actually, because
Mhm.
when you learn how to drive in the snow and there's no hills, it makes it easier to not kill yourself. And
Absolutely.
but then when you get down farther south towards Columbus, then there's the whole like Hocking Hills area where there's a lot. It's more mountainous, and it's a very different. The terrain is way different, for sure. And so it is. There's a lot actually in Ohio, contrary to what some people believe when they said, "Oh, you're from Ohio. Did you turn out the light when you left?" um, but I was like, "Bro, it's not Wyoming." But anyway, there's
Yeah.
people there, but so yeah, it was an interesting comment to make. But
Oh no, that's great. So what I like to do is I know you've done a lot with designing electronics and this and that, but I want to go through talking about you, the musician, the educator, the bass player,
hmm
and the composer. And I wonder if you could take me through a little bit of timeline here, as far as I mean, again, so anyone watching, we didn't rehearse anything. We had no idea what we're going to talk about other than probably music. That makes sense, right? So
sure, makes sense.
yeah, I had read somewhere, I think maybe it's on your bio, that you went to, is it North Texas State? Is that the name
Yeah,
of the school, or it used to be anyway?
yeah.
And then
Now it's called University of North Texas, but yes, they changed the
okay,
name about the year that I went, actually. So
because they've had a really great music program for a long time, it
yeah,
seems. Some great staff, professors, teachers. So
yeah,
you went there, and I saw something about maybe you were in a Michael Brecker came in and did
yeah.
a clinic.
We did,
That's
yes, and
really cool.
it was really cool. Well, I mean, that was the thing about North Texas was that it was because of that reputation, in spite of the fact that it was like in the middle of nowhere. I
Hmm.
mean, Denton, Texas is like, if you never heard of Bowling Green, Ohio, then you definitely never heard of Denton, Texas, unless you know about the college, right? Because it's just
Exactly.
so. But it's got this great reputation that goes way back. I believe Leon Breeden was the guy who started the program there, and I think and they started all these labs, right, which were named, I think, because originally they didn't have their own facilities for rehearsing, so they rehearsed in like the science labs, like they literally
Oh, cool.
Excuse me, called them lab bands. I think that's the story.
Hmm.
Um, somehow or another, Lou Marini was involved in that. I don't know if that was. Anyway, she's associated with that paradigm somehow or another. But I can't remember. I just can't remember how. But I know it was significant. So
Hmm.
sorry,
Hmm.
sorry, Lou Jr. It's anyway, but because I know him. But um, but yeah, so yeah, it developed into this huge program, and it ended up like 9 lab bands, which is insane, like 9 20-piece lab bands.
Yeah, that's a lot. Yeah.
And of course, they named them for the time that they rehearsed: the 1 o'clock, the 2 o'clock, the 3 o'clock, yada yada, up to the 9 o'clock band.
Wow.
But they attracted lots of great musicians. I mean, I got to play with Michael. I had met Michael before, like just on gigs, like hanging out with Patitucci after these double bill gigs that Chick was doing with Herbie, where Michael was playing with Herbie, and I got to meet him a little bit then. And then he came and we played together, and we formed a relationship at that point. But I mean, I also got to play with, gosh, Art Farmer and Freddie
Oh,
Hubbard and Joe
no,
Williams and
no
Jimmy
way.
Cobb
Jeez.
and Wynton Marsalis. And I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on and on. And those aren't things I put on my resume because they're college. It
Mhm.
doesn't. But so it's like, yeah, I played a clinic with Art Farmer or whatever. I mean, it doesn't. Yeah.
No, I
But
get it.
you know what
But
I mean. But
still,
I
that's
did.
just that's a part of history, man. I mean, it's just part of your history. Then and hearing about is really cool.
Yeah.
I don't know anyone who's played with our farmer that I know of. Even for 5 minutes. So now I know somebody.
Well, it was at least 5 minutes.
Yeah, yeah.
But it was a really fast tune.
Mhm.
So there were still a lot of notes. But yeah.
Wow, that's cool. So what time frame were you there in Texas? I'm asking that only because I kind of keep track of who's there, sort of. I don't know who's there now though, but I think like Mark Johnson might have been there, Ed Soff.
Mark, uh,
Oh
enough.
gosh,
Mark Johnson was at my senior recital.
really? Oh
Yeah,
wow,
yeah.
man.
He just was there. He's kind of from. I think his family's from there something. And yeah, it was really weird. Yeah, I remember as I was setting up, we were getting ready to start, and I looked down, and the room was really full, and they had people just sitting on the floor in front of the seats because there wasn't any room to sit. And I look in, there's Mark Johnson. I think he had his daughter with him,
Hmm.
and they were just hanging out, and it was very cool actually. It was I don't know if I got to even meet him that day actually, but he's so brilliant too. But he's a ridiculous player.
Hmm.
Just plays the hell out of the bass. Yeah, Mark Johnson is there, but I was there 89 to 93. So um, the guys that I was there with would be that you would probably know about, who would be like Keith Carlock.
Oh yeah.
Um, I think pretty sure Ari Honig was there when I was there. I know we crossed over at least a bit, but
Hmm.
I think my memory's failing me. But we'll talk about brain stuff later.
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah. We
but
will.
but let's see. But then Henry Hay was there when I was there, and Henry's, if
Okay,
you don't know Henry, you should, because he's friggin' brilliant.
I know
Um,
Henry.
and oh gosh, I know there's more. Another really fine New York bass player named Cliff Schmidt was there when I was there. There are more. I know there's more. I'm probably gonna piss somebody off. I just can't come up with it right now. But yeah. But then like before me, was like Lyle Mays, Steve Bailey was there.
Oh, okay. Hmm.
Yeah, Lyle and Steve Bailey and a whole bunch. Yeah, Ed Sof. You mentioned Ed Sof. He was there. He was teaching. He was
Right.
teaching the whole time. I loved Ed. I love Ed. He's a brilliant player and a great guy and a funny guy. I mean, my God, he's funny, and I don't, it's not probably for public consumption, but man, he's he's a funny dude. So we used to really an awful lot of fun, and I used to play sometimes. They didn't have they didn't have a dedicated jazz bass faculty member when I was there.
Hmm.
Fred Hamilton was there. Fred's another friggin' genius, and
Yes.
he plays bass and he plays guitar. So sometimes on faculty ensemble. What am I trying to say? Yeah, well, whatever. Yeah, the faculty ensemble concerts. He would want to play guitar, so they'd have me play bass because I was in the 1 o'clock band. So it was just sort of, I guess, the next logical thing. So they had me play, um, and so I got a lot out of that. And I should say before I forget, as far as North Texas goes, the interesting thing, the sort of the good and bad thing about North Texas both is that for me it was an absolutely ideal experience because I got in when I got in. I just turned 19 and I got straight into the 1 o'clock band in my first semester, and I stayed there for 3 years, which meant that I got every opportunity they had to offer. I got to play with every guest artist and everybody, right? So and so did the guy in the 2 o'clock, whomever that was, which changed a little bit over the time that I was there. John Button, I don't know if you know John Button,
Hmm. Yep.
playing with the Who. He was in the 2 o'clock band when I was there,
Oh,
playing his
wow,
ass
that's
off.
cool.
He's a great musician. Uh, but uh, but then I know that there were also people who got there and were really needed to kind of work their way up through the ranks, and it wasn't necessarily the greatest experience in the world for them. So I don't know. I know the opinions that I've noticed over the years, the opinions that the people that were sort of the at the time in the top few bands seems to be a little more positive than those the guys that were even the guys that ultimately ended up in the top bands. Still wasn't necessarily as great an experience for them. So I don't know. It's just, I mean, I guess all I can share is my perspective. For me, it was fabulous. So
That's great. I've never been there. My sister lives in Dallas. I've probably literally been there 50 times in the past 25 years. Uh,
it's roughly
and
twice a
we've
year then.
also traveled all around Texas teaching what I do with the Parkinson's and neuro stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I
Mm-hmm.
still haven't been to North Texas. I wanted to go in and just check it out, as a tourist, if you will. But
There's a lot of history there for sure.
oh, definitely. That's one of the things about these conversations, talking with people. It's like we were talking before I went live. Is um, the conversation can go wherever it goes, but what's so interesting is just some of the history stuff we don't know about. Things that that you can share that we don't know. That people love to hear stories. They love to hear concepts. They
Mm-hmm.
love to hear like sometimes how somebody's thinking as they're playing, if they're thinking, because thinking can mess things up too. But or maybe how they're feeling or approach to certain things. And so, actually, I have another person watching, Jeff Stockham,
Mm-hmm.
my favorite trumpet player I have ever worked with. And I'm not just saying that because you're here watching Jeff, but you were the best, man. What a badass. So,
Well,
do you know Jeff?
I will defer. I'll defer, Carl, and say that I believe that he's super badass. I don't know, and I don't know. I don't,
Okay.
but I believe you.
Oh, he is seriously, yeah. He's the real deal, man.
Awesome.
The realest deal. So, what did you ever work with Michael Brecker like outside of North Texas? Did you do gigs and stuff with him at all?
I never did any. The only gigs that I did with Michael, I did a lot with Randy, but I only did a couple with Michael over the years. Michael was an amazing advocate for me. I mean, he really was. He really was very supportive and it really helped me out, in a few really key ways over the years. Um, and he was a very dear, warm person. I miss him. I really miss him all the time still. But we worked. I mean, I hired him for my records, and in fact um, yeah. I hired him. When I hired him for my first record, he was extraordinarily generous with his time and in a very shocking way, actually, in a good shocking way, and it just was incredibly easy to deal with, and just even though I was only a 24-year-old, new, whatever, young punk, he took direction like any professional would, and of course I was careful to be very respectful, but he made it a very easy experience. In terms of times I played with him outside of that, there's really only a couple, and they were both with Chick, and they were only one tune each, because when I was playing with doing the electric band thing, that tour started off with one gig up in Somerville. Is it Somerville, Massachusetts? Like,
Yeah, yeah, near
Boston, basically
Boston, right?
Boston, yeah.
Yeah.
And Somerville Theater, I think, is what it was. And
Hmm.
essentially, the way that the tour was structured was, he sent me all the music, and this actually was maybe the closest to being terrified I might have ever been. At least when because he sent me all the music and said, okay, so look, such and such date, we're playing a concert, or we're going to do a 1 day rehearsal at the Somerville Theater. Next day we play the gig, and that's the beginning of the tour. So I was like, so I got to learn all this music, which is a lot. I learn all of it, memorize all of it the best I could. I mean, not he was. It was okay to have music on stage, but I really didn't want to.
Hmm.
So I had to learn all of it, and then show up and have everything nailed well enough to do one rehearsal, and on the road. So the next gig is Lincoln Center, right? And then Saratoga. So, uh, but it's the way that Chick had done it. He did one of those, like I think he called it rendezvous or something, where it was, he starts off with him and Gary Burton,
Oh
and
yeah.
then they did like a little set, and then Michael, uh, and Eddie Gomez and Vinny Colaiuta,
Oh, wow.
just Vinny,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
play did a three quartets set,
Okay.
like from that
Hmm.
record, which this
I was
record,
just listening to that this morning.
I'm
Yeah,
shocked
yeah.
that very few of my students know about that record. A lot of I show it to them and they're like, "Oh my God, this is amazing!" I'm like, "God, this is like something that everybody needs to have in their catalog." But
Oh,
anyway, so
totally.
then they
Yeah.
did the thing, and then the electric band came out. We played a set, and then at the very end, everybody came out on stage, and we played, of course, Spain, and it was really fun. So there's me and Eddie Gomez standing next to each other,
That's
Weckl,
cool.
Weckl and Vinny,
Oh,
Michael
geez.
Brecker and Eric Marienthal,
Oh,
Frank and
God.
Bali, Gary and Chick. I didn't forget anybody. I don't think I forgot
Jeez.
anybody. And then so we played together then, and it was obviously really fun. Uh, but I remember we during the rehearsal, uh, which was just it's sound check rehearsal really for that, and we Eddie and I were just, what are you gonna play bass? You want to play a chord part or something? And he just said, you play bass. He said, I'll do something. So I said, okay, fine. So I remember we were in the middle of the tune, and you know, Eddie was it was kind of hunched over his bass, up in the thumb position, kind of playing chord tones and stuff, and just a little uh, Latin-esque, kind of rhythmic pattern. And he's got his eyes closed, and at one point he looks over at me and goes, "It was really funny." All right, so I guess okay. I was just very unexpected, but it definitely disarming is all in a good way.
What a
So
what a moment though, huh?
yeah, it was pretty fun.
Well, speaking of Chick, I just I have to say this
And of
because
course,
it was
he passed away.
absolutely, yeah, absolutely. My mom sent me a note. She found on his Facebook page the announcement, and like literally 14 minutes after that, uh, she sends it to me, and I'm at my daughter's house. And I'm looking with my granddaughter too, right?
Hmm.
I it like a freight train hit because that's I was listening to Three Quartets this morning because I just wore that vinyl out.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, that is a masterpiece. And so, oh, Teresa Demuzio's with us too. And Yussi Dubin, how you doing, Yussi? Good to see you, man. Good to see you, Teresa. Hey, by the way, I sent your book today, Teresa. I wrote a book last year, and I want to send you a copy too. But talks a lot about the brain.
Oh, yeah.
We're gonna get to that too.
Okay,
But
good, good.
anyways, what's interesting is how much really joy uh, Chick brought to so many lives. I mean, he actually doesn't know this. I never met him. I saw him play, a couple dozen times, but he got me through some hard times because his music carried
Mm,
me. And I realized when I listened to Three Quartets today, that was a time in my life where I just moved to Evanston, Illinois, Chicago, with the intention of going to
hmm.
school at Northwestern, where I was, you know, accepted in DePaul, except that I didn't go. I just lived there and did other stuff and gigged a lot. But that was a hard time, man. And Three Quartets basically is what got me through. I listened to it every day, all day, or night. So you know, I just had to say that because Chick really, really added so much to my life. So I'm still in shock. But
No, I hear you.
yeah,
I
and you
hear
got
you.
to work with them, and I saw you. So I saw you with the, I think it's the State Theater or something in Ithaca,
Yeah, I
Electric
think that's
Band.
right. Oh
Yep.
no, no, the Electric Band? No, we never. The only upstate gig that we ever did with Chick was Saratoga. That was the one that we did, and then we did Lincoln Center, and then we split the country.
Really?
And yeah, and we went to we just spent the rest of the time over
I
in
was maybe
whatever.
I saw you somewhere else. I got it
Maybe.
confused. I also have COVID brain going on.
No,
Uh,
I know all about that one too.
Post COVID brain inflammation and all that weird stuff that makes you forget things. Um, okay,
Yeah.
well, I know I saw you with him. It was, Gambale, Weckel, the band.
Right.
And it actually, I don't know if this was true. Somebody was saying you were doing like the first part of the tour and Patitucci did the next part or something like that, but
No.
don't know. Okay,
No.
more COVID or if it was fake news, whoever told me.
I
But
don't know.
that was a great show though, man. It was just a great show. I loved it.
Thanks. Yeah, it was. I mean, all of those gigs were very, special
Sure.
in their own way. And yeah, it was really sorry. It was really a cool. It was just really a cool experience, and just to play some of that music, and just to see how he notated some of it too, because it's insanely um the way that he notates stuff is insanely more simple than what you think you're hearing.
Okay.
It's really remarkable that I mean, what you hear as whatever C minor or C7 altered, everything. He just writes like C7, and
That's
it's like
great.
it's not just a C7 chord, Chick, but at any rate, yeah, that was cool. I'm just curious, did you ever get um the CD version of Three Quartets with all the extra stuff on it?
Yeah. Yeah, I think he plays drums on Confirmation.
Yeah, he does. Yeah, yeah,
Eddie Brecker.
yeah. Yeah, it's just him and Michael, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Well, so actually Peter Erskine posted that tune yesterday. I think. Pretty sure. And I ended up sharing it, but I have the CD. Yeah, I have the CD
mhm.
version. It's a lot of extra stuff. There are other tunes too, and I can't remember what they are.
Well, there's that. No, is that?
Oh,
I can't remember how it goes. It's folk song. It's called folk song.
yeah.
Um, yeah, it's something like that. That might not be the right key. Maybe it's here.
Yeah, yeah. I love that tune.
Something like that. I can't remember, but pretty tune. It's really really interesting. I actually sometimes I use that tune to teach because some of the theoretical stuff that he does in it. That's the way he uses like minor major 7 chords as dominants and that kind of thing. And it's just unusual, really unusual tune. Not unlike most of what Chick wrote, but yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. I saw something this morning on YouTube. It suggests stuff because you listen to something else, and it was a Electric Band from 1990. Uh, there were just two tunes on this thing, and they're both. Well, one is from Return to Forever, early days, off the Hymn of the Seventh Galaxy. I never remember names of songs ever, but and then they went right into another one, which is an upbeat something off of Leprechaun.
Mm-hmm.
I'd totally forgotten about that song. I'm like, oh man, that was in my first year in college at the music school here, and I'm like, oh, we just ate that. The drum section ate that up, man. I think Gad played on it. Yeah, it's really interesting the volume of work he put out. I mean, it was huge, just
Yeah.
huge.
That what's the record that's got like what is it?
I think it's Friends.
Friends. Yeah. And what's the name of the tune? Oh,
Uh,
the One Step. It's called the One. Yeah.
okay.
I remember that,
Oh,
and I remember
oh,
learning. I
Carol,
remember
right?
learning that as a kid. I remember sitting in my room when I was like 13, and copying Eddie Gomez's bass lines
Mm.
and
That's kind of like Three Quartets Band, but with Joe Farrell instead.
right, yeah, right,
Yeah.
right.
There's another guy. Did you ever meet him?
No,
No. Yeah, I never saw him either. I never met him, saw him, or anything.
he
He
was
died too
brilliant.
young.
My God, he was
Jeez.
brilliant. Yeah,
Another one gone too young.
yeah.
Uh, okay, so what? Let's jump around a little bit. I'm curious. I know you're teaching at Berkeley, and they're lucky to have you. That's really cool, man.
It is
How's it
cool. I
going
love it.
there? You were saying that they went extremely well when they went online last year, right? Because
Yeah.
it's Friday, March 13th was the day that everything almost got
Yes.
shut down. I actually got back from a trip to Florida Wednesday the 11th. We were worried the flight would get canceled. I have to rent a car and drive up, and I just don't like long drives. But anyways, I made it back. I got back to the university where I was working doing some of the neural rehab stuff at Syracuse. That was it. They pulled the plug. Everything went virtual. It took a couple weeks, but Berkeley was on it, man. Right, like
Hmm.
within a week or so.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing is we all had to pretty much spend our entire spring break, getting ready. But it went smoothly. Bailey spent a lot of time researching and digging up information and finding out who's done what better than whom, and all trying different stuff until we kind of zeroed in on how we were going to handle things, and just all of the ins and outs of the scheduling, and it had to be a freaking administrative nightmare. It had
Yeah, I
to be.
bet so.
But they handled it really well, so it was cool. It was very cool. And I'm loving teaching there, bro. I'm learning more. It's like Ron Carter says, fool is the teacher who doesn't learn from his students.
Mhm.
I mean, I've easily learned as much or more, at least about my own playing, from my students as they have from me. I think, which might be good, because the more I learn, the more I realize what I'd done wrong, and the more I know what I've done wrong, the more I can help other students not do it wrong.
Yeah,
So,
well, that's actually just I think being a student in general. I talk about with these neurologists and these other people. I was talking with a lady last week in Connecticut who's in charge of a movement disorder clinic. She did a presentation for us live here on cannabis, medical marijuana, and
woo! Sorry.
how it can how it can help, or not medical, but how marijuana and a certain amount of THC.
Hmm.
Actually, there has to be THC in it to really be effective. Just the
Imagine.
medical version usually is very low percentage. But the bottom line is there's very little research right now. And why am I saying that? Because I keep learning and learning and learning all the
Yeah.
time. And then we had people asking questions live who have Parkinson's. And I swear, every time I teach a workshop, do a presentation, I learn more than they. I even tell them I'll probably walk out of here learning more than you do because you're going to teach me too. It's amazing, just being
Yeah,
a
it,
student.
it, it really is. Well, I mean, the thing is that freaking, with how connected everybody is, the world's changing so damn fast all the time. If you're not learning constantly, then it's actually, this is something that Chick Corea said to me, and it was freaking brilliant. And I'm not surprisingly, but he says, Mike, he says, in life, you're either going like this or you're going like this, and if you're going like this, you're really going like this.
Yeah,
Which is, like, if you're just holding pat, the rest of the world is, is changing around you. So you've got to be engaged all the time. So yeah, I'm with you 100%, constantly learning.
it's very true. And it's interesting because I just recently, like the past year, I haven't done a live gig in 7 years, just over 7 years. I just needed to take time,
Hmm.
reevaluate myself, and all this other stuff that goes along with it.
I know
But
about that.
very slowly, I'm coming back around to merging the two things, my two passions,
Hmm.
music and brain,
Hmm.
music and movement, music and healing, music and neuro stuff. And I'm on a pathway, so I
All
can't say
right.
much more because I don't know much more. I'm still searching, but it's going to happen. It's going to happen this year. So maybe I'll hit a drum again this year. Who knows?
I would love it if you did. You got to beat your drum, man.
Got to be, that's a Tony. The drums were made to be hit, Tony Williams. I hit my drums.
Yeah.
Um, well, that's cool, man. So, I've actually been talking, having a weekly thing going on Wednesdays at 11 a.m. with Skip Haddon.
Hmm.
You know Skip up at
I don't.
Berkeley?
I
Oh,
don't.
you
Oh
gotta
no, yeah,
you
wait, wait, maybe I do. What, is he a bass player?
drummer.
No, I don't then.
Uh, yeah, well, I don't know if you've seen him when you're up there. He kind of looks like this.
No, we don't. We don't. People don't see each other very much up there.
Yeah,
Even it's such a freaking big, sprawling, different buildings all over.
different floors and buildings. Yeah,
Yeah,
so you may not have seen him. We have a weekly thing going in 11 to noon or so on Wednesdays, and it's just fun because we talk about whatever we feel like.
yeah.
Um, and his actually this book he wrote years ago for his master's degree was what turned into a book, The Beat, the Body, and the Brain. It's like,
Ah,
oh man, well there you go,
right.
merging already. That's great. Yeah, so let's change topics for a minute.
Okay.
You told me a couple years ago we were talking, and
Hmm.
I think I saved this thing. There's a doctor in San Francisco or the Bay Area.
Yes.
What's that person's name? What is his name?
His name is Dr. Charles Limb, Limb.
Charles Lim. Yeah, okay. I thought I brought up the page, but not that it matters. But this got you and me talking about brain,
Hmm.
brainy stuff, and to me, it's one of the most fascinating things in the world. I really dug in last summer, and I just started going strictly, almost 100% exclusively nervous system and brain because it's all just a big loop, anyways. There's no beginning and there's no end,
Hmm.
and how it can change itself. And that to me is so fascinating how the brain can change. The only organ that can decide to change because it's the brain.
Hmm.
Your liver will change too if you do stuff to it, or just over time, all your organs change, right? But the brain can intentionally, with you can deliberately change. So, tell me about this doctor. I'm curious. Did you meet up with him or talk with him? I forget the story on this, Dr. Lim.
Well, it, I was it's on that website. Sorry, that's my email. I was on that website talkbase.com, and
Mhm.
um, uh, I saw someone had posted with a problem with a Federa bass. He had bought a bass used, and something was intermittent in the preamp or whatever, and he had posted if anybody could help. And I saw that he was in Maryland, Baltimore area, so because he was at the time, and so I said, yeah, I mean, I built that. Just, if you want to come over, I'll. So he's cool. So he did, and it was nothing serious. It was literally just an electromechanical. Something was loose. It just needed to be tightened up. Um, so but when he came, we got to talking, and my I, my dad grew up in uh, largely anyway in Elmhurst, Illinois, right? So uh, not terribly far from Evanston, Illinois, I guess.
Mhm.
And he's with a piano teacher there by the name of Arnold Schultz. And Arnold Schultz was an author. He was a pedagogue and an author, and he'd written a book called the Riddle of the Pianist's Finger, which is just essentially a complete treatise on the physiological mechanics of playing the piano, and it runs right along with in the same paradigm as another book, the name of which I don't know, but was written by a guy named Otto Ortmann, who was a Peabody affiliate of some kind, and I don't know what he did there, but um, and in his case, he had college support behind him, and he'd done a lot of like high speed photography and a lot of this kind of stuff to see really what was going on with various different aspects of playing the piano. It's specifically really about the piano, and of course, Orton's research confirmed Schultz's, basically.
Mhm.
But then Schultz had realized that there was more to it than just physiology, and so he wrote this very incredibly dry but fascinating book called The Theory of Consciousness. And it's really 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 heady stuff, and some of it is understanding every little nuance of the theory that he has really, really difficult and probably not entirely necessary, but there are a lot of, unless you're really wanting to go even deeper. But his observations and his theories proved to be, many of which have proved in practice anyway to be pretty accurate. Um, and just in terms of the way the brain deals with its interface with the nervous system, motor nervous system, and I've really gleaned a lot of useful. I've gleaned a lot of progress and just by understanding sort of what this paradigm that he talks about is, and what was the most interesting and sort of I think gratifying for me was that um, I was in Salzburg. I was asked to give a speech about this in Salzburg. It was like I was back in 2015, I guess. My
Okay.
wife, my wife and I flew over there. Actually, she's also an educator and she's a brilliant, brilliant teacher. And anyway, we went over and I gave this talk. But what was interesting was that the guy who spoke before me was another researcher named Arne Dietrich, who teaches at the time I think he was maybe University of Cairo or something like that.
Okay.
But he gave this speech about the implicit and the explicit mind.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
One being consciousness, basically. One being lizard brain. The motor nervous. Uh, and that's essentially was the breakdown of those are essentially the two major categories. There was a lot of detail involved, but the speech, the talk that he gave really so closely mirrored exactly what I was planning on saying, but with different nomenclature, that it was gratifying because I realized, all right, well, so I'm not the only person who's like, thinking this way, right? Um, and So it was very cool. So as Charles and I talked about that and got deeper and deeper in, he kind of realized, I see, so we're kind of on the same wavelength because he was doing this research where he was putting musicians into an MRI, an fMRI, and scanning while you played a keyboard along with a track.
Mm.
He designed this keyboard that didn't have any ferrous parts in it, so you could safely take it into the magnetic field of an MRI, and and so he just kept in touch with me, and then finally he asked me to come and do the research. And then like the Discovery Channel, I think, from maybe Discovery Channel Canada, came and filmed it while we did it, and it was a thing, and whatever. But so we just had a common interest, and so I was a test subject, and I also was we conferred about potential other experiments and what have you, and so it was really, really interesting. I mean, unfortunately, what the real downside was that in 20, and that was around 20, I don't know, 8 or 9 maybe, but in 2011 I had a stroke. So and it was kind of in Broca's area up here, and so it was pretty much right where the kind of language centers, at least on that side, are, and which is which was the focus of the research. Because that's
Okay.
what they found, is there was stuff going on there.
Oh.
And so anyway, that made me no longer able to be a qualified
Oh. Yeah.
subject because I'm damaged.
Yeah.
Anyway, but so that
You've
was
been
that.
doing it. You're doing okay since then.
Yeah, it was very anomalous. I had a PFO. It's a patent form of ovale. It's a hole in the heart. Common, very, very common atrial septal defect, and just confluence of a few different things. Apparently, a clot formed and popped through the hole and went up into my brain. Part of it went in my lung. I didn't. Well, symptomatic. I had a little itty bitty embolism down there. They had
Mm-hmm.
me on blood thinners for a while. I went away. I mean, it all went away. I left the hospital without any deficits at all.
Good. Good. Yeah.
I was on a gig. I was playing a gig with Joe Locke and Jeffrey Keyser and Mauricio
Oh.
Zotorelli as this was happening, and and Joe and Jeffrey and I, well, all four of us have played a lot together. Joe and Jeffrey and I go back a long way, and they were concerned because they were. I mean, I could play. My
Mm-hmm.
motor thing wasn't messed up. I mean, I couldn't hold a form. You'd say, okay, when we get to the end, we're gonna vamp it 4 times. I get to the end, and I'd be like, what? Like I
Yeah.
just didn't.
Yep.
It was a bad scene. So they were like, "Wow, man!" And after they found out what happened, the joke was, "Man, Pope really sounded like shit on that gig, but for a guy having a stroke, he was killing it." So yeah, it wasn't a
That's
great
scary
gig.
stuff, man.
It
I
was
mean, I've
scary.
never had a stroke. I had a massive amount of blood clotting. Um, and actually, just diverting for 1 second, it's almost 2 years ago. Um, Arrived in Singapore, went directly to the hospital,
Oh,
and stayed for a few days. Then, of course, I couldn't fly. I got grounded, so I was there for almost 2 weeks instead of 4 days. I didn't see anything because I couldn't hardly walk.
oh
But
God!
you know,
It
this,
was a thrombosis, the deep vein.
yeah, it was a 10-inch solid section in the popliteal vein. 10 inches solid, yeah.
Holy
And
shit!
they removed it here when I got back. The day after I landed, my son's a doctor in Atlanta, so
Hmm.
he pulled some strings and got me in here just
Hmm.
in the nick of time to have it. Yeah, so blood thinners and all that. So, what was that doctor's name again in San Francisco?
Charles Limb, Limb.
I'm just looking here because there's a book that I have, which I'll show you just a second. Where the heck is the author index? Oh, here we go. Yeah, yeah. So he's a part of this book here, which I picked it up since I seen you last. The Handbook of Neurologic Music Therapy.
Okay.
Now, I'll send you a screenshot if you want later, or excuse me, a picture of the cover. I love the book because it talks about so many different aspects of how music can change the brain,
Hmm.
whether you're listening to it, moving with it, or so from an, like say extrinsically. This morning I'm just sitting on the couch getting some notes together and listening to three quartets. So I have a little stimulation going on.
Hmm.
But if I was to get up and move with it or something, well, now I have extrinsic and intrinsic. And then there's you're performing. If you're doing a solo thing, whatever, it's intrinsic. It's so the kind of activity that happens in the brain is so there's so much with electrical synapses and these different firing patterns and neural circuitry and all that. But then if you're playing in a band, right? When we play in a band, you got both aspects coming on and the interaction with all these different players, and so it's a fascinating book, and it's my primary focus was using music to help gait people who don't have symmetrical stride,
Yeah.
and I tell you, it's been highly effective.
Do you know a woman? You know of a woman named Kathleen Howland?
I know the name.
She's on the faculty. I don't know if it's a BoCo or Berkeley, but she's in the music therapy department. And I was at a presentation that she gave, and it was brilliant. Um, uh, and she showed some research. Because they use. I mean, I'm sure you've heard of it, entrainment theory,
Yep.
entrainment therapy.
Yep.
So and they showed some video of a stroke victim who had a very asymmetrical gait because he had partial paralysis on one side, and supposedly, I mean, not supposedly, but I'm gonna slightly paraphrase to be as truthful without knowing the exact numbers. Let's just say that he had some significant period of time of standard physical therapy, and with some results, but not a lot. And it was just a matter of like, I think it was, I don't know, 45 minutes or an hour. And they had him from the place where he could walk, I don't know, 40 feet before he wore out, and
Mm-hmm.
it would take him X amount of time. And they got him going on this entrainment therapy. And in like, with, I don't know, 45 minutes or an hour, he was going 80 feet in about three-quarters of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it was. I mean, it was like a friggin' switch, because obviously taking advantage of the fact that we all, humans have that, the vast majority of us anyway, have that built-in ability to entrain. You hear,
Yeah.
if I hear one clap, I don't know what's next, but if I hear two in a row, then I can absolutely predict when the third one's going to come, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what they I know you know this. I'm preaching to the choir, but the point is that that's what they relied on, and it was incredibly effective. I mean, really, really brilliant. So they're kind of learning some of these back doors into how the brain really deals. It's I'm not going to ramble. Go ahead. Anyway, but
Well, no, actually, you might find this interesting. I just got to find the video. I'll show you real quickly. There's a gentleman, and Buffalo, New York. Jamie has invented this thing that I have now. It's called the Electro Skip. So you put this thing on your shoes, these things on your shoes, and it doesn't interfere with the shoe at all. It's a prototype right now. It's not, you know, okay, that's old. And when you step, it makes a sound. It's hooked up wirelessly to this tablet, actually a Surface Pro that's specially modified for use in this thing. And so I've had people trying it out. I haven't figured it all out yet, but the one thing I've found real interesting is that if I use the metronome on this thing, and you hear the metronome, and you can have it be different sounds, so it's not just a click, but you
Mhm.
hear it, and people start stepping with it. Actually, when they don't step with it, the sounds sound all messed up. It's like yeah, it's just
Oh,
so if they slow down or if they speed up, sound go the notes sound weird because when you step, these sensors pick up. Uh, uh I may up. Oh, yeah, here it is. It's all you. If you stop, it's hard to see. So what happens is there's a whole bunch of stuff you can do with this. It sounds a little bit funny, but it's actually fun. And
no, it makes sense. So it's essentially musical feedback to physiological input. Is that kind of what it's trying to keep? Like,
yeah, actually, you can do gauge assessments off of this thing too, and you can look at data and these all these graphs and things like that.
uh,
And so it's cool because if we stop the metronome, but she keeps moving at the same speed without the metronome, she's creating it now internally, right?
mhm.
Intrinsically, sounds perfect. She can go a very few beats a minute or uh, difference, but if it goes too far off, then it just sounds like nonsensible, no sense in the music or the notes at all.
Right.
So, I'm still learning about this thing and just starting to use it more now that I'm kind of back to working with people more post COVID. Uh, this
It's
COVID
actually
brain is
it,
left over. That's all.
yeah, I know, I hear you. That actually that device sort of reminds me of something that I used to. Well, I'm not just I used to do. I've seen a lot of people do with like if you program a digital delay and you get it to harmonize with you, you play a scale and you get it to where it follows you like every two notes, so it's always a diatonic third behind you, and you got to keep and you have to keep your tempo, you got to keep your time absolutely dead on the money. It's got to be exactly right. As soon as you deviate, then it starts going gaboom 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 instead of da 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 da.
Yeah.
I mean, there's not, well, I mean, there is a physiological thing. I mean, you got to play in time and you have to hold it there, but you get a different, your mistakes yield a result other than just what you're playing. You screw up what it's playing back to you.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
it has a little bit of a different impact on it. But I guess it's the same sort of idea. But that's brilliant to put them on shoes, man.
It's been really cool. It's been cool to watch the oops, I turn my volume down here. Just watching the feed in case we get questions. By the way, people watching, if you have any questions for Mike Pope, put them in the comments and let's just check here on Zoom. Yeah, it's just you and me. No other people. Okay. So it's fun. It's always a straight, eighth note type of thing or whatever, not shuffly because you don't want a shuffly step. That's usually the problem, anyways. Is
Right, right.
and that leads to higher fall risk and falls and all kinds of problems potentially. So, yeah, and then this kind of like helps to fire up everything in a certain way where now you can actually start eventually to feel what it's like to walk symmetrically so
Mm-hmm.
that when you don't have these things on and you're just out in the normal, you're out at the store shopping or you're walking around your house or whatever, you're more likely to have a more symmetrical gait. So
Yeah.
it's an experiment, but it's fun. It's definitely fun. So
Huh. You
so
know, I
no,
just
go
want
ahead.
to, I'm just going to throw, just that just made my mind think of something that is a pedagogical, little pedagogical technique that I've seen used. Um, Sometimes if you're trying to learn, learn a line of some kind, and it's hard to play, if it's straight eighths or whatever, sometimes they'll have you slow it down, to learn it. You slow it down and you swing it, but then you go ba-da, and there's that somehow or another, and I don't know the science behind that, but that does somehow or another kind of help your motor nervous system to kind of organize the connections between the notes to get all of them, dead on. But the idea of having a shuffle that goes boom, ga-doom, ga-doom, to going da-da, 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 I just wonder, I wonder how what that does for someone an asymmetrical gait, to just turn the gait around,
Mm.
start off with the bad foot, you know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? And
Mm-hmm.
then, well, not whatever. I don't know. It's a thought. I think this stuff is all so new that it's kind of like any idea is worth at least giving some thought to, because I don't know, but it's a growing field, obviously, rapidly.
Yeah, well, one of the things I say in my book is that I'm all for research. I think it's great. I use it as much as I can. I try to find as much as I can to learn things, but I can't allow myself to be boxed in by it, because we kind of have to be our own researchers too. I mean, we need to be sensible to a degree in regards to, let's say, what somebody's actually capable of at that given moment. You
Right.
could push it way too far, and they could get hurt. Push them, don't hurt them, but try stuff, because if you don't think outside the box, it's not wrong, but chances you got to do your own research sometimes. I think it's real important to experiment and then find stuff that works, because everyone's different anyways, right? Everyone learns differently.
Yeah, and I think that what you said touches on something else that carries over directly to pedagogy. That's it. One of the first things that I try to do with a student that I don't, with whom I'm not really familiar, and with whose playing I'm not familiar, then is to try to identify what they're good at. I mean, I know that there's a big pedagogical trend is never practice, don't practice what you can do, practice what you can't do, and yeah, that's true. But at the same time, if you don't, if you know how to play Mary Had a Little Lamb, then you're not going to just jump to playing, Rachmaninoff G minor prelude because you can't do it,
Mhm.
right? So I mean, there's a logic to it. There's some sort of a progression, but uh, I always find that it's the most useful to teach find ways to teach people using what they are good at, not to rest on it, but use what they're good at to get
Mhm.
them pointed in another direction,
Mhm.
to grow that way. It's a much more effective way than saying forget everything you know. You have really good ears, but we want to teach you to read, so stop using your ears. I think that's stupid. I think it's stupid to tell any musician not to use their ears for any reason.
Oh
Period.
yeah, I
It's just really
100%
stupid.
agree.
But I do think that that it's harder to it can be really harder to engage a student in reading, without them cheating, so to speak. Relying on theirs. You have to find material that's not so easy to just to absorb and hear so quickly. But but again, like just like if you, I would imagine if you're doing therapy with a patient, identify what they're capable of, right, and
Mhm.
figure out a method that you can use drawing on what they've got to help them get better.
Yeah, I mean, certain techniques work for just about everybody, but we also have to assess them. Basically, if you don't assess various aspects, like you would probably assess a student, so to speak, right, and what they're able to do right now,
Hmm.
and what level they're at in various capacities, and then take it from there, and then definitely finding things they like to or they're good at and they like to do. That makes a huge difference. Hey Julia, how you doing? Good to see you. um yeah, so it's huge. It's it's all just so fascinating too. And I think I typically tend to overcomplicate practically everything in my life. Up until a couple of years ago, I started to realize that it
Guilty.
doesn't need to be rocket science to be effective. Although I
Guilty.
like the geeky science stuff, but
Yeah, me too. Well, but it's kind of like it's like my friend David Yates, who's my partner in building electronics for years and years. He's also a very fine bass player, and he always used to tell me, see, he's primarily a world-class engineer, but he also plays bass very well. But he would always, he told me early on when we first met, we were doing some design work together, and he said something to the effect of, he says, you know, man, it's not really that hard to make something that's extremely complicated that gets a job done. He says it's really hard to make something that has four inexpensive components that you can build for practically nothing that will never break down and do the same job. Right?
Yeah.
That's what's hard.
Mhm.
And in truth, if you really think about music, I mean, what's harder? I mean, learning to blast a lot of scales really fast, or learning to write a sublimely beautiful song like Burt Bacharach did, or
Oh
like
God,
any
yeah.
of the greatest songwriters. You know, I mean, they'll write a simple song, and it has as much passion and depth to it as any complicated music you can find.
Hmm.
Just in a maybe in an understated way, but it's there. The
Hmm.
knowledge is there. It has to be in order to be able to do it. You know, so I have an amazing ton of respect for that too. But
I'm glad you brought that up because literally, it's really just been since I stopped playing drums that I realized so many different things. For example, Burt Bacharach's a great example. He's written so many songs that actually Prince did too, but he wrote them for other people, right? Like the Titanic theme that Celine Dion she
hmm
sang. That's a Prince song. He wrote that.
that's Prince.
Yeah.
I didn't know he wrote that song. Damn,
Mhm.
wow.
Mhm.
Honestly, I remember seeing her perform that on the Oscars that year, and she friggin' killed it. My God, she's
Yes,
great.
she crushed it, man.
That's just so. It's her thing, man. That's her. You know, right? It's
The
like
girl's
her.
got a set of pipes, man, and she's beautiful voice. And I don't typically ever listen to her on purpose, except that when I do hear her, I really appreciate what she does.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you on
I
that. Yeah.
actually was talking with George Whitty recently. He's done some work with her.
hmm
That's pretty interesting. So, anyways, going back to like Burt Bacharach, I mean, the guy's a genius.
Yeah.
He just, I was just thinking that song that I don't know the name of it. I don't know any song names, but I think Dionne Warwick sings on it,
It
and
says
it's
that
just
the
it's
moment I wake up,
that's
I
it.
make say a little prayer. I think
That's it.
say a little prayer for you or something like that. Yeah, yeah.
That's it. And
hmm
so, actually, I grew up listening to big band stuff, or salsa. It was Stan Kenton, Buddy Rich, Woody Herman, Maynard Ferguson. My parents really loved that stuff, and Tito Puente and Tito Rodriguez and all these people. It was great. And then my seventh grade English teacher said, "Carl, man, you got to check out Billy Cobham, and you got to check out Chick Corea. You got to see Return to Forever." So they came to the college here. I was 12 or
hmm
13 maybe, and Al Giamiola had just joined the band. I couldn't even believe what I was hearing and seeing. So I completely, if fusion's still a word, that was what we called it back then. I went to Mahavishnu, Return to Forever, Headhunters, complicated, busy, and it took me like decades to realize or even understand anything that the Beatles wrote because I always thought it was like too simple. It just can't be good if it's not busy. I like the Beatles
Right.
now more than I've ever liked them in my life. I'm actually starting to even like purposely listen to some of the songs. They're brilliant songwriters.
Honestly, yeah, I completely agree. I actually, I mean, I've had very much the exact same experience. It's just, my appreciation for simplicity in music is growing and growing, as I get older. I'm not trying not to rest on that. I'm trying to learn to, I'm trying to learn to still, I mean, if you take any musician really at a high level in any genre. I mean, you can take like Horowitz, for example.
Mm.
Horowitz, he got older. He may have his understanding of the sort of the finer points of music may have grown. He lost the ability to play the living shit out of the piano.
Hmm.
And he
Hmm.
never went, "Oh, I don't play the shit out of the piano anymore because this is where it's at." It was never like that. He still played the piano, and he really played it, and he didn't lose chops and he didn't lose power. And that was cool. and that's, to me, that's the responsibility of a, of a mature musician, is to, I
Mm.
mean, you learn to appreciate all that stuff. But in my opinion, it's like, if my range of intensity has, if my appreciation at the bottom end of it has increased, it's more that the top end stays where it is, and now I'm able to appreciate a wider range as it as as the floor kind of drops rather than
Yeah.
the ceiling goes up. uh, I,
Yeah, that's a good analogy too.
I love
Yeah.
that.
Hmm. Yeah, I was trying to think of who else I was listening to recently that was oh man, I don't know, but Paul McCartney, just after the Beatles.
Hmm.
Think songs like Band on the Run or
Yeah.
I mean, I love that. I never liked that song, but I love that song now.
Yeah.
It takes me on a journey. It takes me on a journey, and I like songs that take me places. They can be complicated and do it, or they can be simple and do it.
I
There's something magical about that ability to write like that. Don Grolnick wrote some beautiful stuff that was simple. I loved it.
Oh my gosh, yeah, he
That
should.
guy
Well,
was beautiful.
but I mean, he was the MD for, for just those years. So
Yeah,
God knows
true.
he was exposed to some really beautiful, simple songwriting too. I
Hmm.
mean, he really understood it, I think, from one of the great masters of writing beautiful, simple melodies, right? I mean, James Taylor. You um, but Yeah, no, I'm 100% with you. I used to play a gig every week when I was in Bowling Green at this little club, and it was a guitar player that I played with. His name was Dan Fanley. He lived in Portland for a long time. Now I think he's back in Ohio somewhere. But God, this guy is he's unbelievable. He's always been unbelievable. I wish more people knew who he was, because it's just stupid. And his versatility, and the world is really missing out not knowing about this guy. But
Excuse me.
he was always, he could really burn, and he could really play jazz and fusion and Mike Stern and Schofield and all the way to frickin' Jim Hall. I mean, and Joe Pass. I mean, he could just really do it all. Jazz
Hmm.
box. And I remember talking about the Beatles, and I was just assumed that he wouldn't like the Beatles because he's such a, hit. And I mentioned, he's like, "What, are you kidding? I love the Beatles." He was like,
Yeah.
"You're crazy." I'm like, "Oh, well, he likes the Beatles. I guess it's okay to like the Beatles." So, it was
Well,
an interesting experience.
it's funny you say that. I felt like I needed permission to like them, and then a saxophone player here who I haven't seen him in a few years, but John Rohde. John, if you happen to see this, I miss you, brother. I hope you're doing great. I see your posts, and thanks for liking my posts. It gives me dopamine rush when I people like my posts. So, but this is like 10 years ago. He used to do this gig every Wednesday for like 15, 17 years. I don't know, whatever. This little pasta place in the city
Hmm.
with, like Rick Montalbano. I don't know if you know Ricky Sr., the piano player. Ricky Jr. is a badass drummer, married to Jane Monheit,
Hmm.
uh, and whoever else was there. And he just comes up when I see, I'm starting to really understand the Beatles. I get it. I get it. It just makes so much sense now. And I actually was glad to hear him say it, but I wasn't about to go listen to the Beatles. But now I listen to the Beatles.
Yeah. Go
It's like
figure.
I'm a late bloomer, man. I'm telling you, I'm going to be 60 this year. I got to get my act together.
Oh, listen, I know. I feel like a freaking. The more I know, the more I feel like a teenager. It just. Wow, I just am able to recognize how much I don't know. Now I just have to figure out what it is. Yeah.
It is funny. Writing this book, it's a big book. I have another one I'm working on. Sometimes I just feel like, I don't even know if I know anything. I mean, I know I do, but I feel like I have to start over sometimes just because it gets too complicated. I make it too complicated. That's what happens.
Yeah, maybe. I honestly, I kind of feel like, I think everybody. I just think that's a perspective thing, though, man. I mean,
Hmm.
like hell, I've never talked to anybody who have gotten to know well enough. I mean, I know, like, Michael Brecker was sort of, like the president of the Michael Brecker Sucks fan club. He was really hard on himself. I don't know why that fan club should even exist, but it shouldn't. But um, but yeah, even that, even Patitucci's. I mean, it's hard to say that John's not. When you consider everything he can do, it's hard to say he's not among the greatest. Period. I mean,
Mhm.
there's a lot of incredible bass players. When you look at the classical stuff, the jazz stuff, the electric stuff, the funk stuff, the swing stuff, everything, the writing, da 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 da. I mean, come on. But we were talking the other day, and he's like, God, sometimes I just practice, and I just think, God, John, you suck, and I'm like, nope, nope. Sorry, man. Nope, you don't. But but I know I mean God I do. Uh, I've spent a lot of time, in my life, especially in recent years, just doing what following sort of Victor Wooten's paradigm, which is of course never a bad idea, but is get out of my own way.
Mm. Mm,
He's
yeah.
always he's and that's such his pedagogical paradigm is so heavily based on that idea of empowering people to be creative and do something that's genuine and creative, whether
Mhm.
it's flipping a switch on your bass or dropping it on the floor or whatever. Do something that's creative and be involved in communicating with other musicians on
Mhm.
whatever level. And that, to me, that's a, I mean, that's, to me, it's brilliant, and it's a reason why a lot of players who follow him wind up being able to really play well.
Mhm.
Um, but uh, uh, he and part of that is just like it's just he really encourages people just to let go of their baggage.
Mhm.
He does a kind of a visualization thing where he'll have somebody come up and they'll start talking about things that they're insecure about, and every time they mention something, then he'll call somebody up from the audience, and that person has to like grab a hold of their shirt and hold them down, and then pretty soon he's got six people hanging off of him, right, and it's all just his baggage, and then he's like, all right, now play. He's like, I can't play, right? And he's like,
Yeah,
boom.
yeah,
So
yeah.
it's brilliant.
No, that's good. That's
Yeah,
good.
it's
Yeah. Mhm.
brilliant. So I listened to some recordings of myself when I was like 17, 18, 19, and I'm like, wow, for 17, 18, 19-year old, that was pretty damn good. And I just basically took the position that I was going to stop worrying about trying to be better at the things that I wanted to be better at when I was 17 and start resting on those laurels, so to speak, and moving on to the things that are my real problems now, you know,
Mhm.
which were not related to my musical knowledge or my musical understanding or my language or my vocabulary. Any of that was not the problem.
Mhm.
I mean, it's always growing, but that's not the problem. For me, the problem was just like freaking being buried in my head um, and just having difficulty getting loose and just playing what was genuine. When I play what's genuine, then I feel like all of the particulars of the technical being theoretical or physical, all that stuff kind of becomes very secondary because it's hard to argue with genuine music. um,
Yeah.
so and I've done that. A lot of that has come out of the brain, out of my understanding of how the brain stuff works, and it's something that I work with my students on a lot. I my father was big on this stuff too, and uh, he always used to talk about. I use the word consciousness, and that's such a heady word, and I'll use it just in lieu of a better word. But um, he always talks about the consciousness behaving like a conductor, and your motor nervous system behaving like an orchestra. Um, the idea is not to train your motor nervous system so that it runs automatically, because we don't want that either. But
Mhm.
what we want is to understand that our consciousness doesn't control our muscles. Our consciousness doesn't control our movements at all. It doesn't do it. The consciousness is all about will, and everything, all the movements are are handled by your motor nervous system,
Mhm.
and that your motor nervous system is inherently economical.
Mhm.
So the idea of working on economy of motion is a little bit of kind of putting the cart beside the horse,
Mhm.
um, because our when you get to the physiological part of it, the the way that we get better at moving, doing things, is by understanding what goal we want, first of all, and then allowing the motor nervous system not to learn to make the movement, because that's not what our motor nervous system does. It doesn't learn to make movements. It learns to get rid of movements it doesn't need. I mean, that's really how that's how you look at a baby flailing around trying to grab something. It doesn't just calculate for 5 days and then reach up and grab what it wants. It flails around until it hits it, and then it flails around a little bit less the next time until eventually the motor nervous system gets rid of all the crap it doesn't need, and
Yeah.
boom, you've got a coordinated movement, right? So that's it, but that process, as we get older, that process can be horribly impeded by the consciousness trying to get involved in the movements. It's not suited. It's like the conductor trying to run into the orchestra and play every instrument. It can't. It just doesn't happen.
Right.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
then for me, then it became an issue of developing what Schultz referred to as a nervous coordination, which nervous is a misunderstood word because sometimes people like nervous, like, oh, this is about stage fright, right? You don't be nervous. So it's like, no, it's not that. It's like just nervous as opposed to physiological.
Mm-hmm.
You coordinate your nervous system. And good example being if you look at if you draw a three-dimensional cube on a piece of paper, right? And you
Mm-hmm.
look at it, you can see it one, and you can see it. You can flip it inside out. You can see it going into the paper. You can see it coming out of the paper.
Mm-hmm.
There's no physiological anything associated with that. It's just literally you choose to see it one way, now you choose to see it the other way. Boom. That's literally a nervous coordination. And the more you
Mm-hmm.
do it, the better you get at it. And so for me, the idea of sort of being in the zone, so to
Mm-hmm.
speak, that a lot of people know about, we've all felt it. These are sensations that we all operate based on. We all can feel when it feels right. The more that you go from whatever existence to crossing that threshold into that nervous coordination, the more you do that successfully, the better you get at it. It's just another coordination. So and I mean, it's obviously it's for me it was a months and years long process, but uh, ultimately you do get to the place where you start to be able to just kind of step away.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you're doing this thing, and the consciousness is still making the musical decisions. It's not like you're just automatic. You're still making decisions, but you learn how to kind of set that without you sort of think about the result. You send the message of what result you want. You send the message of what you want done, but you let the motor nervous system handle how to do it
Mm-hmm.
because it
Mm-hmm.
knows better than your consciousness does. Um, and it all sounds very heady, and I don't think about any of that when I'm playing at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's not on my mind at
Mm-hmm.
all. But it's a concept that I've learned to associate with a sensation, with a feeling, and I know when I'm there, and it's to the point now where I can feel if I'm there, even if I'm not playing. I
Mm-hmm.
can mentally put myself in that zone, and it really makes a big difference because my God, it's the sound, the result of it is the difference between something that's good and something that just feels like I'm, just more like breath. It's just like a
Yeah.
column of air. Um, so it's been a process. It's been a real process for me, and I honestly haven't really liked anything I've ever recorded until maybe I've actually had a few where I've thought like, wow, this actually, I can listen to this and not want to go throw up. So it's it's kind of a nice change, and it's nice to be able to be more focused now on the more subjective musical things. On just like really it, learning how to build solos in a more in a broader sense, and
Mm-hmm.
really kind of focus on the things that are less sort of concrete.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a nice feeling because I don't think about music in terms of math for sure. I really try to think about it as subjectively as I possibly can, um, which is to say I try not really to think about it.
I
um,
understand. I can relate to that in many different areas besides music too. I think this is a somewhat of a parallel, just kind of thinking a million thoughts right now. Like, for
sure.
example, if I get up and go walk to get a cup of coffee, I won't be thinking about every step I take because I don't have to. You
Mm-mm.
know, um, I mean that's a super simple analogy of that motor system just takes it knows what to do. I don't have to think about what to do on that.
It's pretty much the interface between everything that's in our head and the rest of the world.
Hmm.
And it's
And
really
then
literally is actually. I mean, that's all. That's what it's there for.
yeah, and two buzzwords going around a lot lately, the past couple of years in my industry anyway, is interoception and exteroception. Interoception is your awareness of within the confines of your own skin, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
Extero being everything else,
Mm-hmm.
and nervous system matching those two, so it bridges those two. So you're aware enough of what's out there, so you can function, and you're aware
Mm-hmm.
enough of what's in here, so you're functioning.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I know a classic example. Well, interoception, complete interoception. I'm told by a neuroscience guy at Stanford, it's that would be like you're sleeping because you're not a. I've been through the most big thunderstorms. Thunder. I don't know that it's happening because I sleep really well,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm not in tune with any of that stuff. Then there's the time at Mexico City Airport where it's all exteroception. I'm all like, I gotta make the flight, and I'm running, and I don't like that airport. I love Mexico, Mexico City Airport. No, and I'm sweating, and my heart rate's up, and I'm breathing hard, and I don't even know it till I stop and realize I missed the plane because I went to the wrong gate.
Oh, Jesus.
Then I start to become aware of how I feel interoception. But that whole awareness thing, and then the other thing that's coming up a lot lately from Stanford new publications, really interesting about when you're able to perform a task or whatever perform well enough so that you're not thinking about everything you do consciously, but yet you're still in the here and now. They're actually what they call here and now brain circuitry.
Huh.
So and that would also probably be defined. It can be defined as being in the zone because you're right. I mean, you were right there,
Yeah. And
here and
yeah.
now. This is it. This is how I feel. I've
Mm-hmm.
arrived at that feeling, and you can just project your genuine, authentic self that way through your instrument or whatever.
Mm-hmm. I was speaking of the here and now. That brings up a really good point. That what I've noticed, at least for me, in terms of the way that my awareness is involved in improvising, for example,
Mm-hmm.
is that my awareness, there's something about, and this is just very subjective, but there is something about if I'm trying to be aware of what's happening exactly in time with what's happening, it doesn't work very well. I find that my awareness happens in chunks. I'm
Mm.
I'm I'm gonna this is what's happening here, and then I'm still somewhat aware of it, but my focus is elsewhere while that's happening. You know, and so and if I try to track right along with it, then everything just goes, just everything just tightens up. So that may not be true of everybody, but it's true of me, and so and but the thing is that it's a you it's a little bit like you can change it when either from either direction. I mean, if I experience a sensation when that happens, but if I choose to avoid that sensation, it has the effect of keeping me from doing that.
Mm,
Does
yeah,
that make any sense? So
totally. Yep.
it's but so that yeah, the here and now thing is that's interesting, but obviously music does happen in the here and now. It
Mm-hmm.
really does. I was going to say one other thing too about because I know we can see that we're probably getting pretty close to being out of time
Yep.
here.
Pretty
Um,
close. Yeah, I've got to wind down in a couple of minutes, but we should do part two down the road here somewhere.
we could. I was gonna. I would love to actually, but I was gonna point out that Arnold's the bottom line kind of Arnold Schultz's theory was he basically had what he called a motor theory of consciousness,
Mm-hmm.
and that our motor nervous systems really have their own awareness. God knows I've had experiences where I've something musically has happened and I've responded to it and literally consciously realized that I responded to it after I'd responded to it. Like sometimes the motor nervous system just does what it does, uh, on its own, as we talk about, right? And it can happen even in response to something. God knows your eyes can't respond that fast, and you sure
Hmm.
as hell don't have time to think about it before you do it, right?
Exactly.
It's really got to be ears and then uh, response. But to drive this home in a non-musical sense, like if I asked you this question, like if think about the house that you grew up in, like the outside of the house that you grew up in as a kid, right?
Hmm.
What color was it?
White.
White. Okay. And where are you standing when you tell me that?
I was standing on the corner looking at it.
Okay, right. So,
One house away.
okay, so what was under your bed? When you remember what was under your bed? Like when did you ever keep things under your bed and have to,
Um,
or even
Probably just clothes that I
okay.
stuffed under there because I didn't like them.
All right. So then very oftentimes you think about what's under your bed, you picture yourself looking under your bed. You think about what your house looked like, you put yourself in a place. You
Hmm.
you know it's there's some sort of a component to that. It's very difficult to just conceptualize something. I mean, even if you try to think about a cup of coffee on the ceiling, you mentally tend to assemble something that's holding it there,
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. True.
right? So there's like this that's extremely watered down, kind of take on that. But that's sort of where he's coming from, and it's really fascinating to me. And it goes way deeper and way heavier. And he's one of these
Oh
guys that he
yeah.
puts more information in 7 words than a lot of people do in a paragraph, and it's really hard to read. It's so hard
That's
to
it. So what's
read.
his name again?
His name is
Schwartz.
Arnold Schultz, and,
Schultz.
and I think it's
Schultz.
just Schultz. I think
I got
it's
to
good.
check it out because it just sounds like the right thing at this time. And plus, everything you just said just totally warrants a part two, because some of that reminds me of the neural NLP stuff, neural linguistic programming. How you can picture a situation, or what you just said, my house. Why do
Mm-hmm.
I picture it from the corner? Because I drive by that house probably once a week, and I'm always at the corner, and there it is. And it's
Mm-hmm.
not white anymore, but it was when I grew up. Green shutters and a
Mm-hmm.
roof that needed replacing, and the big maple tree in the front that we used to tap and get syrup out of, or uh,
Mm-hmm.
sap, and then boil it down. So,
Mm-hmm.
but there's a thing about that where you can associate things with places and periods of time in your life, and then these associations can lead to all kinds of maybe healing or lack of, or I don't know. It's really interesting. Really
I,
interesting.
I find it pretty interesting too. I
Yeah,
really do. I think it's cool. Very cool stuff.
absolutely. Well, yeah, definitely I don't feel like going, but I have to. And I know you have a student coming up here in a little while.
Yeah, I've got a student
Um,
at 2 o'clock.
this has been fun, man. I really appreciate you joining me.
My pleasure. I'm glad. Thanks for having me.
Good to be able to talk about this stuff. And I find that some of the most interesting conversations I've had with some of my favorite musicians don't have anything to do with music. And I love
Yeah.
that.
Well, God knows, anytime I've ever had tried to have a conversation, say about music theory or something like that, with some of the really high level musicians that I've known, like eh, Joe Locke or Jeffrey Keezer, or I mean, they'll talk about it, but they don't really spend a lot of time talking about the ins
Mhm.
and outs of music, really.
Yeah,
Unless they've got a tune that we're rehearsing. But it's like it's just. I mean, they just do. They just do what they do. It's more about doing than talking, which of course is always a good thing in my opinion. But yeah, there's
sure.
something about that it's just like a lot of times it's more fun to talk about other stuff. So,
When I see Dave Wecko, all we ever talk about is muscle cars.
oh
Right,
yeah.
because he loves the Corvette he has and the Camaro he used to have, and I mean, I'm totally into cars
Well, I just
anyway.
bought I
So,
just bought a V10 BMW M5.
whoa, really? Holy
Oh
cow,
my
man!
God, it's a great car, man. It was really old. It's an '06. It's in beautiful shape, really low miles, and my
Whoa,
God, is that car fun to drive? Oh,
gee, that's good.
but
So you get
yeah.
some torque out of that baby.
Oh, well,
Well,
not as much torque as you'd think, but a lot of horsepower.
uh-huh.
A lot of
That's great,
horsepower.
man.
Yeah, yeah.
That's great. So if people want to learn more about you and your music and all that, your website is
Yeah, Mike. It's just MikePopeJazz.com is the best one. Uh,
mikepopejazz.com. All right, cool.
Yeah.
Good.
www.mikepopejazz. Yeah. Well, cool, Carl. Thanks a lot, man.
Hey,
I really
hey,
appreciate it.
it's good to see you again, my friend. And I'll be in touch. Well, maybe next month or something we can do it again. Part two.
I'm down. Yeah, sounds
Okay.
good.
All right, man. Thanks so much.
Sure,
All
my
right.
pleasure. Thank you, Carl.
Yeah. Have a good day and a great weekend.
All right, you too.
And thank you everyone for watching too. I really appreciate it. I didn't mean to not say goodbye to you, but thanks for tuning in. We appreciate it. This is a lot
Yes,
of
thanks
fun
for
today.
tuning in, everybody. I appreciate it too. That's great.
All right. See y'all later.
All right, later, man.
All right. Bye bye.